I'm excited to welcome everyone here. My name is Mary Beth Jarvis with Nextus. I'm here joined by other members of the Nextus team. We've got Josh Oding in the back of the room, our CEO. He's also founding partner of our Accelerate Venture Partners Angel Capital Group and a longtime participant in the startup ecosystem here in Wichita. And on that note, Trish Bracestead is in the back of the room. She's a part-time honorary guru member of our team and a driver and a pioneer in helping to improve the environment for entrepreneurs and young and startup companies here in the region. And we're so glad to have her part of the team. Quinn Robertson, who you guys got announcements from, is driving us today. So any technical difficulties, you get to take that up with him. If you happen to be an Arkansas fan, he'll give you a high five for that as well. I am joined on the stage by JP Moore, but we'll get to him in just a second. I first of all want to give a huge shout out and thank you to the team at Groover Labs. We've got Tracy Hoover here, her husband Kurt Gridley. They are the masterminds and the wallets, generous philanthropists that they are behind creating Groover Labs. For those folks in the room, if you have not taken a look around the facility, do so. For those of you on Zoom who haven't come by, it's on St. Francis Street between 2nd and 3rd. It is an amazing space, but more importantly, it is a community being built to serve growing companies, makers, creators, entrepreneurs, founders. So if you haven't witnessed what they're building here or taken advantage of their services and thought about joining here or having a workspace here, please do. You can take a look at their website. We're just glad they've hosted us here this morning and continue to do so for many of our events. So thanks so much, Tracy and Groover Labs. I want to introduce JP, but first I'll talk a little bit about the administrative here. JP is going to talk for a bit, and then we're going to get into a question and answer phase. We will take questions both from folks on Zoom. Please do that via the chat function. We're going to generally keep Zoom participants muted, or we're going to dork up the sound system here at Groover Labs. So put your questions into the chat function, and we'll take questions from the room as well. So we'll try to manage that as best we can. Be patient with us. This is scheduled on people's calendars for 30 minutes. We may go slightly long if there is just a wave of questions that needs to be addressed. Do stick around to the end if you can. We have some really interesting and exciting news about the next one of these that'll take place in March. And so hang on with us through that if you can. So now, the man, the myth, JP Moore is the managing director of Koch Supplier Solutions. Basically, he and his team own negotiating and driving relationships with digital and HR suppliers across the breadth of Koch companies. Those suppliers are startups. Those suppliers are giant enterprise providers. It's across the spectrum. We probably think we understand the goal of what he does, and that is to forge profitable relationships between Koch and its vendors. What we're hoping to hear about today is more about the why and the how. What is it? What are those behind the scenes motivations that exist on his side of the table and that can be, to a certain extent, extrapolated for other large enterprises? And the how. What are some of the behind the scenes processes that if you are trying to do business or collaborate with a large enterprise that you could and should become more familiar with? So JP, we're so delighted that you're spending time with us.
Thank you. The delight is mutual. And I hope to, on your bingo cards, count how many times I say mutual. Hopefully it's less than 30. But we talk about that a lot.
But it's a thing.
It is
mutual.
A thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just a concept. It can be a reality. And we can talk about that.
Perfect. All right. I'm going to leave you the stage and have at it. Thanks to everyone again for being here.
All by myself, once again. So my name is JP Moore. As she said, that was over the top, really nice intro there. She laid out what hopefully I've come to talk about. If you've got questions, go ahead and things that you came wanting to know, go ahead and post those because I want to make sure we get to everybody. And then I'll just make the invitation at the top. I realize I might set myself up for being inundated. That'd be a good thing. But if you have questions, we don't get to them, or if you want to follow up on something I've shared from something to try or an aspirational concept that you really want to understand how that works in the real world, my contact information is on LinkedIn, and you can find me. Koch Industries, kochind.com, j.moore. But anyhow, so real quick who I am. I'm born in Wichita, raised in Wichita, other than spending about 8 years in Baltimore as an adult professional. I've been in Wichita all of my life. And I would say, without, this is not about me, so I'll keep it short, but just about every work experience I've had throughout my life, I've been able to pull something from and is part of what we do today. And so I'll also talk a little bit about now that path of what we now call Koch Supplier Strategies. At the very beginning, she had mentioned my title, which I had to be reminded of what that is, Managing Director or something like that. And this goes back years ago, about 18 years ago. And I was kind of pushing paper in a very traditional sourcing and procurement manner. And my title was Contract Manager. And I thought, well, what the heck is that? I don't manage contracts. And anyway, I went to my boss at the time and I said, hey, boss, every time I talk to suppliers, potential partners, they want to talk to somebody else because I'm not the right guy. I'm a contract manager. And they want to do business. And so, you mind if I change my title? And I won't use the expletive, but he said, if it doesn't cost me any money, call yourself whatever you want. So anyway, that's transformed a few times over the years, but it's telling in that we started talking about tactical empathy 18 years ago. We didn't know that that's what we were talking about, but it was about how can we understand the motivations and things that incentivize suppliers to want to do business with the right people at the right time. So like I said, roughly 18 years ago, we're doing 3 bids and a buy. We're sending out RFPs. We're talking about sometimes some things that just aren't very pretty in the negotiations world, and did that for a couple of years. And when you start trying to think about how you can do things better, it was all about how can be more efficient. Reverse auctions came out and all these kind of processes that really stood between us and the supplier community on how to do business, and started thinking about how we could just bust that up and do something better. And as we thought about tactical empathy and we thought about titles, we started to engage folks less in a 3 bids and a buy mentality and more about, let's understand what you're trying to accomplish, when you're trying to accomplish it, and can we align that with what we need to accomplish it and when do we need to accomplish it? Well, 18 years later, my team hasn't done an RFP in at least 15 years. So we can still create competitive tension. That's a good thing. We want people to earn business, and we want people to bet on themselves when they come to us as to what their value prop is. But there's a lot better ways to engage and create that discussion, dialogue, and make the right connections with folks rather than sending out a bid process. So that's where we're at today. We're about solutions, right? That's not a buzzword. So anyway, we talk about taking long-term strategies with suppliers, partners. I'll use those words interchangeably. If we get to it, we can talk about some distinguishing factors or characteristics between a preferred partner and a preferred supplier. That's more of an internal thing, but we could talk about that. So Koch Supplier Strategies is today a 4-fee service. And the reason I bring that up is we need our own competitive tension. If we're going to continue to do better quarter after quarter or year after year, what's our incentive to do so, and maybe even what's our felt uneasiness? So if I have a paying customer within the walls of Koch, that means this team has to perform better than that business's next best alternative. So it keeps us always striving, trying to do better, and we're not overhead. And I think that's an important thing to think about. We consider ourselves a specialized sourcing category because we do fall in the category of sourcing, but specialized in that we're dealing primarily in the IT, digital, telecom, and HR space. And so we're all doing SaaS. We do very few, software implementations anymore. And the worlds between HR and IT are greatly blurred. And so a traditional sourcing and procurement group, they aren't well versed on how to deal with intellectual property. And I'll note that intellectual property of yours and or ours, data privacy, IT security, things that when you start talking about going to the cloud, traditional sourcing procurement folks, that's just outside their wheelhouse. So it's in our wheelhouse. And so as we've developed subject matter experts on the team in intellectual property, we can talk in a real way about co-development, co-investment, and those are things we can also pull subject matter experts outside our group, whether it's KDT or other business development organizations across Koch, into those conversations. So we're an inverse sales model, and so we believe any engagement really should have this mentality of a seller, right? Because the supplier community wants us to buy something, we get that. But if we take a buyer's mentality, then we've already taken a potentially adversarial position with that supplier. And if we're gonna live long-term and we're gonna grow together and we're gonna leverage your IP and your services and what you do to transform how we conduct business, and that needs to look more like a partnership than a supplier-buyer. A supplier of caustic soda to the sourcing procurement group, that's a commodity. You can have that buyer-supplier relationship all day long. It's going to be about market rate and volume and time and supply chain costs. A little different world with intellectual property space. So that's worthwhile. We've also, a few years ago, a guy named Chris Voss came out with a book called Never Split the Difference. When I saw that title, before I ever heard him, before I ever cracked the book open, one, it just jumped out at me because that was one of our many mental models that we use within our engagement framework. It's like you never split the difference. And this gets down kind of into the tactical, so I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole. But from a negotiation standpoint, we want to talk about value. We do want to understand the marketplace. So we want to get at or better than market deals, which goes beyond price. But we see folks, and we even see sales organizations. So maybe this is something you can take and ask yourself if you do this in your organization. And that is you do some kind of series of engagements. We'd call that negotiations. And you finally go, you know what, let's just split the difference. Well, if we've got a point of view of what market is, and we've laid that out early on with you into this relationship, what's that? Is it giving up? Is it a contrived, end to something you just don't want to do anymore? And so that book jumped out at me. And as we read through it, it's based in tactical empathy. And so we didn't use that term prior to the book. Now we do, and he's got other models in there. So that would be a suggestion. If you've not read Chris Voss's Never Split the Difference, look it up. You can even complement that with, if you're a member of Masterclass online, he's got a 11 episode series on there. Really good stuff. When I think about hurdles that we have to overcome at times, failure to have an imagination is one of them. And so the challenge to imagine big enough, a book like that can help you think that way. How am I going about what I'm doing in a better way? Let's talk about the landscape real quick from this was titled How to Do Business or some of the insights to doing business with a big firm. First off, I'll be the recognize that Koch Industries is a very large privately held company, and it's really a set of companies, right? So we've got some very distinct vertical businesses, but it's privately held. And the way we think economically is not common in the marketplace. And so hopefully there's some things here that you can take as you deal with publicly held companies, but I can tell you that It's going to be vastly different experience in many ways, and in some there might be similarities. We're going to be less process driven. We're not going to send you to a supplier portal to register and become approved before you can call the right person. But the same challenges, we represent similar challenges as a public held company, and that is, how do you get to the right people? And the right person in most publicly traded companies are not going to be the sourcing and procurement folks. They are gatekeepers. They are doing literally somebody else's bidding. A little play on words there. They're doing somebody else's bidding. Somebody has demand behind them at the plant, in the business. They want to do, they have a need to fill. And so once they decide what that is, then they'll go to their source and procurement folks to do some kind of market engagement. Wichita, if you're Wichita based, Wichita is small enough, you can make connections and we can find the right folks. That's what my team is there to do also. We've got a very rich knowledge network, and that's a term we use internally, but we know a lot of the right people to connect folks. I mentioned we have these vertical businesses. The knowledge sharing or the discussion engagements across those silos don't always happen effectively. Because my team works across all of those silos as well as enterprise deals, we can help get people connected that might not otherwise get connected, and maybe somebody's already gone down a path that would be duplicitous if somebody else did that. So we're a hub, a knowledge hub within the global organization of Koch Industries, and we try to maintain that effectively. Now, if that means my email blows up, so be it, But the landscape, so what I'm getting there is the landscape isn't even. Some people think I've talked to colleagues at publicly traded places, and I'm always challenging on, why are you doing all this process stuff around RFPs? And it's like, well, it creates an even playing field. Like, stop. There's no such thing as an even playing field, right? Particularly if there's an incumbent involved, they should have some kind of pole position. Size, are you a firm of 4 to 10 people or 1 to 4 people? If you get that sale, is that new customer going to represent 90% of your revenues? That doesn't happen with the SAPs and the Oracles of the world. It's not an even playing field. So just coming back to that idea, we want to have a business discussion and understand if our needs can be met and or developed with what your firm brings. So let's talk a little bit about, and some of these are reminders. If you're already doing them, I'm always curious about your own sales approach. Is it very process oriented, or is it agile enough to make accommodations for unforeseen hurdles or unforeseen access? Right? What if you find yourself chatting it up with the CEO of a company? What do? Do you come on strong? Do you just like show up and throw up? Think about tempering emotion. I'm trying to stay away from examples that are too blue, but temper the emotion. Just because they swiped right doesn't mean you're going on a date. If you know what that means, I don't, but anyway, yeah, so if you're going to contact me also, I'm kind of interested in learning from you as well as to what works and maybe what doesn't, or what are you thinking about how to engage folks. Sales organizations are pretty interesting, but try to find business development folks. Every firm has them. They need you as much as you need them, as long as you find the right ones, right? Because this world is all about transformation and finding ways to do things faster, cheaper, better, just to use that that bit. So I can leave you with some, because we're going to be up on time, I think. Yeah. Be aware of a few things. So these are things maybe not to do, or if you find yourself doing them, think about it. Why are you doing them? So rote sales questions. You know, what keeps you up at night? I'd like to talk to you about what you have planned for 2021. What are your goals and aspirations? And that's tired. And I see it on the faces of our leaders when they're asked that kind of stuff. It's not going to really get you where you want to be. We've talked about excitement and how to temper it. Make connections without dropping names beyond necessity. So that can be off-putting. At the same time, I talked to a startup guy about 10 days ago, so I've got some recency bias here. He came my way via email and had all the right names, all the right leaders on that email. It's like, you're in, dude, let's talk about what you want to do. He spent the first 20 minutes of a 30-minute call wanting to let me know his history as a serial entrepreneur and all these things he's been involved with. And I'm here to help. I'm like, dude, I want to understand your value prop, and is it fit? And if so, let's go find the right folks to talk about. But he spent 20 minutes talking about himself. And he brought some assumptions. So check yourself on assumptions. Because they're big, do you assume they have one sourcing procurement organization? Do you assume they use IBM? Check yourself on assumptions. So there's quite a few more beware kinds of things, but do we have any questions there that you want to get to?
Yeah, we'd love to get to some questions. You ready to have your rhythm interrupted here? Okay, bringing them on, he says. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about this tactical empathy, because I'm going to like put that on a pillow or something. It's an incredibly effective phrase if you understand it right and you behave in accordance with that. I think that, the example you brought up about spending 20 minutes of a 30-minute call telling your story, you got to tell your story, but you've got to tell your story with the what do they need on the other side, kind of in your head. So talk a little bit about what you hope a young enterprise, a startup, would empathize with about you, the pace you can go, the steps you have to take, the people you have to turn around and convince or deal with. What would you like them to know on your end?
So tactical empathy is really trying to put yourself in their shoes and trying to understand what the motivations, incentives, hurdles, things that make them go woo, what are all those things? And so understand that a large organization's pace is probably not going to match that of a smaller business. And so it can be a really long arc. And we talk about negotiations should not be an event. It should be, it's really from that first call. You're setting a tone, you're finding out about them, and then what do you do with what you find out about them? Then in a sales 101 process, you would be talking about qualifying questions. Well, the first thing you're going to do if you have a list of questions to ask somebody is something's not going to be on that list you should have asked them, right? So it's thinking about them individually. Where are they in the marketplace? What have you read about them? What do you know about them? And then understanding how, you are going to qualify. Am I even talking to the right person here? But so how can you meet them, this term, where they live?
Yeah, makes total sense. Spinning off of that, you hear lots of folks that have the opportunity to coach startups about how they present themselves, how they tell their story, and what to do with interactions. One of the pat phrases is, your goal is to earn a next conversation. Now, as a startup approaches a large enterprise, that can sometimes feel code for this goat rope of endless conversations that precede actually getting a deal done or a partnership done or a pilot run or whatever it is. What's your view on the goal of each conversation?
So early on, a goal is to establish credible rapport early, right? Whether you're likable or not, that's not always, a requirement, but credible rapport. And then, as you talk, this gets real tactical, but as you talk with them, always qualifying, you know, that next call. I'll come back to the book, you know, Chris Voss's book, and he does a, what's he call it? An acquisition audit. And it's, once you start talking to people, do you get a sense that they've got some reservations about something that are unspoken? You know, you're trying to listen for those things unsaid and bring those to the front. I get a sense that you're concerned my firm isn't up to scaling to your need in the time and pace that you would require. Is that a concern you have, right? So it's advancing that way. It's also, if somebody goes silent who has been actively involved, I think it's very helpful. Some might find it off-putting, but I think it's very helpful if that supplier reaches out and says, hey, we had some good talks for a while. Let me know, are you still interested in having that discussion or not? It's a good way to go, is this going anywhere, or should I go spend my
Right, that's an actual human question that deserves to be asked and answered. Another follow-up question. This one is a little specific to Koch, but you may want to broaden it beyond. It's kind of that whole land and expand, right? You know, that is sort of sought by many. If you've got a startup, or if you as a young company are first engaged with a piece of a larger business, you know, are there specific tips for parlaying a hopefully, you know, productive relationship with one business unit to, you know, to cross the walls, you know, to others? How should that dialogue progress?
Yeah, it's going to vary. We spend time in the non-commodity, or rather the business critical and business strategic space, and we're looking for that scalability. Number one, if others aren't, you should be asking that question: how can we minimize the cost of our relationship? I have a cost of sales, you have a cost of engagement. How do we together minimize administrative overhead and bureaucracy in what ultimately is found, you know, is going to be memorialized in some kind of paper contract? I mean, we're negotiating the deal, it's memorializing the contract, but in that first time, can we make this scalable and leverageable so that as others want to come here, we're not contracting 4 and 5 times over? That's one way.
Okay, I've got a super practical question, and then I'll give a second to see if we've got anything in the room we want to be responsive to. But I'm gonna come up and I'm gonna invade your space here. So the super practical question is, if you get to the point in a discussion, first conversation or after, where someone is willing to listen again and says, send me some stuff. If I'm a founder of a startup, what does stuff mean? Like, what should I send? What should I ask you? What does that mean in my world?
So everyone has some kind of generically titled pitch deck. You know, this goes back to kind of a model we think about. Don't let someone else do your bidding. Don't let somebody else take your value proposition forward. And that could be an internal salesperson that you've developed. But be careful about that. You want to represent you want to represent your firm, or you want your folks to, and your value proposition. I would pivot on that. And like, you know, I just don't think that what we have on paper really represents what we ought to be talking about next. And I'd like to get, you know, more conversations with folks to bring that to life. We can always leave behind stuff, but I'd be wary of putting that in somebody else's hands to take that forward internally.
Sounds like smart advice. Okay, so last question to you from me. If folks walk away from today remembering only one thing, what should it be?
The difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is knowing tomatoes are a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put them in a fruit salad.
Okay, so that's what's going on a pillow. Come on.
Yeah, but it's about this. So if you walked away with one thing that you want to practice it, apply it, make it your own. Don't read a script out of a sales process. That's the takeaway. Genuinity, if that's a word. Being genuine wins the day all day long as you try to build and create that credible rapport.
Credible rapport. There you go. Genuineness. It's all there. JP, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate everybody who tuned in via Zoom and in the room. I just want to kind of draw back to the 10,000-foot level here. NXTCONNECT, this is all of our second month of conducting these NXTCONNECT programs. Last month, we hit some local authorities to talk very practically about the latest round of PPP and how that could apply to startups in our region. We'll talk in a second here about what next month's going to be. All of this is a part of the growing product line of Nexus. Nexus is a nonprofit, privately funded, whose only role in life is to help build a more vibrant and productive ecosystem for growing young tech-enabled companies and helping them thrive in this region, find customers, find capital, find resources that are going to help them. And I would encourage you to take a look at nexus.io to understand what all Nexus is up to and how you can tap in. There is an open ear. Get Josh, get Quinn, get me, get anybody in the loop to say, here's what I'd love to have you guys cover next. Here is a speaker I'd love to see up here. Here is a source I can't get to, but you guys might be able to for some wisdom and some connections and resources. We can do that ad hoc, or we can jam somebody in front of this program in a month or 2 or 3 and get you an audience with a source of wisdom or a resource that might be useful to you. We've got Bill Gardner, who's one of our board members here in the room, and he can attest to the fact that there is a huge community of traditional businesses behind the idea that growing the innovation economy and becoming a more productive birthplace and growth place for startups is hugely important to our economic vibrancy as a region. And so we try to put as many smart brains and resources behind that, but we need you to chime in with what would be most helpful. And on that line, we want to thank folks that were involved today. Koch for letting JP sneak on down here and spend some time with us. Thank you, JP.
Thank you.
Another shout out to Groover Labs for hosting us here in this space. And again, building the community they're trying to build around supporting startups. And I will shamelessly give you a plug for next month's event. So Friday, March 26th, 11 a.m. right here in person or on Zoom online. We're going to bring you a national authority, a guy by the name of Nathan Gold. Super hyper, awesome, fast-paced, rapid fire guy that is all about helping you tell your story more effectively. The Wall Street Journal and MIT and Wharton School of Business know him as kind of the demo coach, the master of the elevator pitch, and he's got all sorts of credentials around that. This will be a little bit about that, but he is frankly going to give you a series of, oh goodness, why didn't I think of that moments about how you're presenting yourself, sometimes electronically. What are you doing stupidly on video conference calls, Zoom pitches, whatever? And then what should you do well from the heart, that genuineness that, that you've got to build, and how you can convey that. And that's whether you're raising capital, or you're looking to get customers, or you're trying to convince a key employee who you really can't afford to come make a bet and get involved with your company. All of those are subjects that we'll cover a month from now with Nathan Gold's interesting and high energy help. So thank you again for coming. JP, you're the man. Have a great day, everyone.